Hello, this is Caelan Huntress, the creative director of Stellar Platforms, and today I'm going to teach you everything I know about running a freelance WordPress business. I've been a WordPress freelancer for 8 years, and what I found is that the business relies on good answers to these 6 questions. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. The answers to these questions will change as your business grows and evolves. I don't know anybody whose business looks just the same today as it did 8 years ago. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. And your answer to these will change over time as you figure out more accurately who the people are that you're going to be serving, the problem you're going to be solving, how to promote your services and products, how to get more productive, how to align with your purpose, and lastly, how to use good process. Now, this is the part that I'm really excited to talk to you about today. The first 3, I could spend all day talking about the people you serve and the difference between your services and the problem you solve. I could talk a lot about that, but I want to get through those quickly so that I can get on to the 2 big parts of this presentation, is the productivity that's required to get a high-functioning WordPress freelance business, and the process. I've got some neat processes that I've used that I'm really excited to share with you. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of each one of these areas. First is the people that you serve, the clients that you have. Not just the specific clients that you've been working with or that you want to work with, but the type of person that they are. And more than who they are, we're also going to look at the journey that they go through from stranger to customer. Next, we're going to talk about the problem you solve. It doesn't really matter what your services are, because I'll be honest with you, people don't care what your services are. What they care about is the problem they need solved. And if you can solve that problem and frame your services in terms of the problem that you're solving, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to get business. For promotion, I could spend lots of time talking about this, but I'm going to tell you the 3 most valuable pieces of content that you can make. And they have to do with selling your services without being pushy, making a great proposal, managing your client communication, and lastly, asking for testimonials and referrals. I'm going to give you a really simple process to get good testimonials and referrals. For productivity, the biggest thing that I can tell you is to read Getting Things Done by David Allen. I'm going to go through some basics of the GTD system, as it's called, and describe why they're so effective for running a freelance business. And then I'm going to tell you some habits of successful freelancers that I've picked up along the way and found to be quite useful. Your purpose is your why. And if you can align your business to your why can help you sell and promote yourself. And then finally, the part that I'm really looking forward to is the process of running a freelance business. Over the last 8 years, I've figured a lot of things out that I'm really excited about. And I don't often get to share it because they're geeky stuff. You know, the formulas that I've devised to identify who my best clients are is really useful, but I can't really describe it to somebody without putting together a presentation like this one, because there's a lot of different moving pieces to it. So I'm going to go through those 4 formulas to calculate your success in the client analysis spreadsheet I'm going to show you at the end, and then touch on some other things that'll be useful process along the way. So this is where I learned a lot about running a freelance business, was at this desk. This is in Costa Rica on a mountaintop in the Southern Pacific Zone. And I lived here for 3 years with my wife and 3 kids. I worked on that laptop and ran a business that supported my family living in the middle of the jungle. And I was able to do it because of WordPress. WordPress has given me the ability to put together an agency and create my own freelance business. And I did it because I built 5 websites. Before we left the United States, I made 3 websites for friends. And then I made a 4th website that showed what I had made for those friends, a little portfolio site saying, hey, I've done this, this, and this. And then I got 1 client to pay me some money to build a website. With those 5 websites, I launched my business. We went to Costa Rica and I worked there quite happily for 3 years. And I've been able to travel around the world working from wherever I can find Wi-Fi and caffeine. And I can do it because of the processes that I put in place that I'm going to share with you today. So when I lived in Costa Rica, people would say, what do you do? And I'd say, well, my business is called Pura Vida Multimedia. And they'd say, okay, what do you do? It wasn't really descriptive. And so I added this tagline, web content and video, to kind of define what it was I did. But after a few years, I thought, this brand doesn't really suit me. It doesn't describe what it is that I do. It doesn't talk about my services at all. And so I started doing some branding work, and one of the questions that I was coming up against is, what am I really good at? What do people say that I uniquely can do for the world? And what's some of the greatest good that I could do? And people told me that I was a really good dad, and that I was always talking about staying fit. And so I made Father Fitness, and I made this whole website, an online course, and branded the whole thing, and it was a whole lot of work. And I pivoted to this brand and realized I didn't do the foundational work to find out what this audience needs. Because it turns out that dads need a lot of things that I can't provide. They need counseling on how to deal with a wife that's thinking about divorcing them, and how to deal with kids in different bedrooms, and all these things that were problems I could not solve. And so I pivoted back and I said, okay, well, I'm going to do web design. I looked at the clients that I'd worked with in the past, and a lot of them were healers or wellness practitioners. And so I built a little brand around wellness website design, and immediately felt stifled, because I wanted to work with more than doctors and clinicians. I wanted to work with a whole bunch of different people. And by niching down to this level, it didn't feel right to me. And so then I pivoted to Stellar Platforms. And the reason I did this is because I realized that making these brands, making these platforms, this is the part that I was good at. This is the part that I could do easily and that I enjoyed doing and people found really valuable. And so now I help people make and refine their platforms. I work with authors, coaches, and speakers who are really good at producing a lot of content, but they have a hard time selling it on their website. That's my elevator pitch. I'm going to come back to this concept later, the elevator pitch, so I'm going to say it again. I work with authors, coaches, and speakers who are good at producing a lot of content, but they have a hard time selling it on their website. Now, the reason I tell you this long zigzag of a journey is because I want you to know this is really typical if you see yourself going through this. If I was so disheartened for a long time that I was going to have to pivot my brand again and change everything around again and order new business cards. And it was really exhausting, but at the same time, every pivot moved me closer to where I wanted to stand. And so if you take pivots in your business and you change again and again, you're getting closer. You get more and more intelligence about what it is you're doing and how to do it well the longer that you do this. So just be open to the possibilities. All right, first let's talk about the people that you work with. If you've been in business for a while, then you can look at the people that you have worked with and get some characteristics that are common about your best clients. And if you're just starting out, you can define who it is you want to work with by creating a customer avatar. Now, a customer avatar is a persona. It's an ideal client that you create. And these are the customer avatars for Stellar Platforms. And I spent the time to figure out who these people are. Not just their demographics, but also what their frustrations are, what their goals are, what their aspirations are, where they seek solutions. The sorts of things that are going to persuade these people, their buying triggers, their common objections to working with me. And I developed all of these characteristics to create a full persona so that when I write a newsletter or a piece of communication, I print one of these out and I put it up on the wall and I write to them. So that way I know that my communication is reaching the right people. I've got a kit where you can make your own customer avatars. You can use the coupon code DIY and go to this link and get the whole kit for free. It's a coupon that'll get you free access to all the worksheets and the tutorials that I put together for creating your own customer avatars. If you're into marketing, you're into doing this sort of thing, it's a really worthwhile exercise. But if you're not so much into this, you might be more interested in the sales funnel aspect of how your customer interacts and behaves with your business. And a sales funnel is the journey that they take from stranger to customer. Every stage of this journey can be described and codified and identified and optimized. You can look at these stages and find two things that happen to your customer at every one of the steps along their journey. During each stage, they're having an emotion and they take an action to move to the next stage. If you identify those two things, the emotion that they have in this stage and the action they take to move to the next stage, then you have a plan for moving a customer through your sales funnel. You can outline this plan in the Sales Funnel Workbook. It's another free piece of content I'm going to give you. It's 10 worksheets that help you define this journey from stranger to customer. And it even helps you identify the different pages on your website that you can use for each one of these stages. And so you can use the coupon code DIY to get the Sales Funnel Workbook for free at the link below. Now let's talk about the problem you solve. Like I said, nobody cares about the services you provide. They care about the problem that you solve. If you can clarify your problem, then it makes it a lot easier for people to say, hey, you're the type of person I want to work with. If you need to go find new clients, you don't have to sell people on why you're great. All you have to do is you got to find the people with the problem that you solve. And the easiest way to do that is to go where they hang out. Your customer avatars have their own communities already. You don't have to build these communities from scratch. They're already hanging out somewhere. Go find out where they're hanging out, where they're seeking solutions, where they are getting advice. And then give people advice. Help solve problems. Be valuable in these communities. It's not a great idea to go there and market yourself and sell yourself when you could be a lot more effective in the long term by showing up, being helpful, being valuable, and getting known as somebody who they can trust with answers to questions that they have. When you build this sort of rapport with your audience, then not only are they going to turn to you when they need this particular problem solved that you've been so clear about, but they're also going to point other people into your direction. Because they have other people they know that are 2, 3, 4 degrees away from you that are also trying to solve these problems. And if you can clarify this problem really clearly, then whenever they see somebody facing it, they're going to think of you. And to do this, you need an elevator pitch. And this is called an elevator pitch because it should take about as long as an elevator ride for you to describe to somebody who you are, what you do, and why you're amazing. And if you can do that clearly and succinctly in one elevator ride, then it makes it really easy for people to remember you and refer you business later. The best elevator pitch I've ever heard was from a guy named Corey Huff. He helps artists sell more of their work online. That's what he does. And when he says that to you, you immediately know if you are in his target market or not. I'm not in his target market because I'm not selling pieces of art online. But anytime I meet somebody who is, I think of Corey. And he has this course called The Abundant Artist, where he teaches artists how to sell more of their work online. And so when I meet somebody who has that problem, that they want to sell more of their work online and they can't figure out, I say, hey, have you heard of Corey Huff? You should check him out because he solves a really good problem. You can use this formula to make a really clear elevator pitch. I help these people solve this problem with this awesome solution. If you're clear about the problem you solve, people know exactly who to send your way. If you're working with WordPress and you do SEO, You help WordPress bloggers who can't get found on Google to rank on the first page. Do you see the difference between this and I do SEO for WordPress? I do keyword research and content, and I fiddle with Yoast plugins. And if you talk about the stuff you do, it's not as effective for people to think about who it is that you need to work with. Let's say you're a WordPress developer. I help WordPress websites that are running too slow to go faster. Or if you've got a specialty in plugins, I help WordPress sites that have complicated plugins to keep their site from breaking. Or maybe you do content. Do you really publish content, or do you help WordPress websites produce content that keeps an audience engaged? That's what people really want when they're getting content. They're keeping an audience engaged. They're not just publishing for publishing's sake, they're solving a problem. If you know WordPress at all in your business, the easiest elevator pitch is I fix WordPress problems. If this is your elevator pitch, that 30% of the web that's powered by WordPress, they think, oh, I could use your help. This is what's so great about WordPress is that you immediately have a target market. If you specialize in WordPress, then every WordPress website is a potential partner of yours or a potential client of yours. So how do you reach these people? How do you promote yourself? Well, there's a great book that has some really great tips that I like. It's called Show Your Work by Austin Caelan. And he wrote this for graphic designers, but I think that his 10 tips that he provides here are useful for anybody in any creative profession. The one that I like the most is number 3. Share something small every day. If you share something small every day, you're doing a number of things. You're providing insight into your work. You're reminding people about your field. And you're positioning yourself as someone with something to say about it. When you hire somebody to work with you on a project, you want somebody who has an opinion about it, who's expressed something substantial about their thinking or their experience about it. And by sharing something small every day, even if it's just an opinion of how your work went today, or a screenshot of some of the things you did, or a clear description of one of the problems that you solved. If you share something small every day, it keeps your network engaged in the type of work that you do. Okay, so now I'm going to teach you about the 3 most valuable pieces of content that you can create. You can put out social media posts all day long, publish on your blog every other hour, and it's still not going to have the effect of these 3 pieces of content. And these content happen to correspond with the stages of the client process, before, during, and after the time when they hire you. Proposals offer your work. Weekly reports document the work that you do. And case studies share your work. Proposals, weekly reports, and case studies are the 3 most valuable pieces of content that you can create. Now, I'm going to go into each one of these in detail, but first, I want to make a point about selling yourself. You don't have to be the smarmy salesperson to get people to buy from you, because you've had the experience yourself where nobody had to sell you into something, but you said, shut up and take my money because you wanted it so badly. So if you've had this experience yourself, you know other people have this experience for other things, how can you position yourself so that others have this experience about you? This is the easiest way that I found to sell my services without being pushy, is by offering a free consultation. I started my business with a consultation, and I've been doing it for 8 years. And anybody who's working on a creative project that intersects with the sorts of things that I do, they can get on the phone with me for a half hour. And I'll tell them what I think of their idea. I'll give them some ideas and next steps. And if I think that my services would be a good match for them, then I'll put together a proposal. And historically, I close these at about 30%. I know that if I'm going to give a consultation to somebody, there's a 1 in 3 chance that I'm going to sell them my services. And so it's worth it to me to keep giving these consultations. But what I found since I've moved into more premium pricing is that the term free doesn't really work as well for me. And so now I call it a digital marketing strategy session. And instead of just getting onto my calendar, they have to apply. So people have to fill out a form on my website, and it's at this link here, stellarplatforms.com/consultation. And they have to fill out a form so that I can get some information about them before I decide whether or not I'm going to give the consultation or have somebody else on my team talk to them instead. But this has been a really nice way to get to know one another, and also to get ready for putting together a proposal. It's an opportunity to ask my future client all sorts of questions to find out how I can best position this proposal to get them to buy my work. And the reason why this is so valuable is because this is what convinces somebody to give you money. The proposal incites the buying decision. So of course, it's one of the most valuable pieces of content you can create. You literally put a price tag on it. So what goes into a great proposal? Well, I recommend you take a lot of time to build a great proposal once. And then take a little bit of time to make another great proposal that looks just like that one. These two potential clients, they're not going to compare notes. They probably don't even know who each other are at all. And so you run no risk of copyright infringement on yourself. You're not plagiarizing. What you're doing is being really efficient about your time. I was living in Costa Rica for 4 or 5 months, and I had this great potential prospect come along, and they had all these things they needed. And so I spent 8 hours making this enormous template. It was beautifully designed. It listed every service that I could do with really good descriptions, and they said no. That 8 hours of work didn't go to waste, because the next time somebody wanted my services, I took that proposal, cut out a couple sections that weren't relevant, and sent it over to them in 20 minutes. And it looked like I had spent 8 hours putting this together for them. And so they said yes. And the next time somebody came around, I had the sales template. So if you make one great proposal template, you can duplicate it for every prospect that comes your way. Proposable is a really great tool. If you're not much of a designer and you've never made a selling collateral before, then this is a really easy, user-friendly way to put together a proposal that looks pretty good. So if you don't have experience in making sales literature, then this is a tool that I recommend. Okay, now let's move on to the second most valuable piece of content you can create, and that's your weekly reports. Weekly reports validate your client's decision in purchasing your services. This is where you document everything that you do. Because let's be honest, when somebody hires you, they may have never hired somebody like you before. This might be their first time hiring someone like you, and so they're really counting on you to tell them what to expect. They need you to hold their hand. If you're the service provider, you're the freelancer, you're the one getting paid, that means that you lead the dance. You tell them what to expect next, how things are going to go, how you're going to communicate with them, and most times they will just say yes because they're hiring you because they want you to set the expectations. Lead the dance. If you do have problems, talk about them early and talk about them often. A problem will turn into a real issue if you don't talk about it. But if you identify it early and you provide options on what can be done, then you're not putting the problem on your client's desk and saying, you need to take care of this. Instead, you're saying, hey, these are the places we can go from here. This is the issue as I've identified it. I've done the thinking to look at the options, and here's the recommendations I can make. This is what they're paying you for. Talk about problems early and often. I do a lot of this communication in my weekly reports, and I use a tool called Outstand for this. Outstand is an email marketing and CRM system that lets you do really great templates. And so I use Outstand to make a template that has these 4 sections in it. And I send out these 4 sections to every one of my clients every week. This is what I did last week. This is what I got planned for next week. Here's some notes on the billing, and here's when we're talking next. And I could do many more sections in this if I need to, but these are the 4 I always start with. So my clients, they get this really beautifully designed, simple weekly report, and it lays everything out for them. So they don't have any questions. They don't have to dig into their emails and figure out when they paid me last and how many hours there are left on the books, because I just lay it all out for them. I make it simple so that they think, every week, they think, wow, I'm really glad I hired this guy. He's got all the details under control. And once you get a system in place, it's not that hard. I hit one button and I get all this. And so then I open up my task manager and I look at everything in the project for one of my clients and I see everything that was logged and I just write the list. I think about what I want to work on next week for this client and I write the list and scheduled for this week. And so this is where I actually do a lot of my weekly planning, is in my weekly report. When I'm creating these reports, that's when I'm deciding what I'm going to be doing over the next week. Okay, so after a client's worked with you, that's when you can write a case study. And the case study tells the story of the progression that they went through from when they first hired you and they had this big problem to after they worked with you and they had this great solution. These stories are so valuable because they convince other people to do work with you. And what we want to do with a case study is we want to describe a scenario that your future clients can see themselves in, so that they can empathize with the problems your previous clients have faced, and they really see themselves as somebody that wants that solution that your other clients have had. These are what the case studies look like on my website. And I've got a bunch of them on there, and there's a lot of material in here, and so I want to go through the different sections with you. Always start with the problem, because you want your future clients to say, that's me, I have that problem. When you provide the solution, then you're describing what it is that is going to help them solve their problem. And you want them to see themselves in the result, so that the result that your clients have achieved is something that other people want, that they can see themselves having. I find it's really useful to list logos of the tools that I've used, because this often is what convinces somebody that I have the experience to work with them. You know, if they've got a bunch of sales funnels in Infusionsoft, for example, which is an all-in-one digital marketing platform, and they see an Infusionsoft logo on my website, then they immediately see that I'm qualified to step into Infusionsoft and understand the basics of their project and what they're trying to do. The most important part of a case study, though, is the testimonial. The testimonial gives you social proof. I mean, look, I spend half of the real estate visually on these case studies on the testimonial. The tabs that I have in my case studies, if you click on them, they open up and they have screenshots and deeper descriptions and all of that. But I wanted to make them small so that you could scan through a bunch of them when you scroll down the page. But the testimonial takes up a whole lot of the space, because this is the important stuff. This is what validates for somebody who doesn't know you that you really know what you're doing, is having a good testimonial. So how do you get good testimonials? How do you get referrals? Well, it's actually pretty simple if you have a process in place. You decide what you're going to ask, when you're going to ask it, and then at the right time, you introduce the conversation. That's it. If you figure out these three things, then getting testimonials and referrals becomes really easy. I start this conversation when I hear one of my clients say, wow and thanks. When they say those two words, wow and thanks, that's when I say, hey, I'm so glad that you're happy with the work that I've done for you. I'd like to get a testimonial from you so that I can share this with other people. Do you mind if I interview you for about 10 minutes right now and just ask you about what it's like working with me? And the reason I interview my clients is because I want to write the testimonial for them. I don't want to ask them for a testimonial sometime in the future and then bug them if they're not getting this task done. To make it really easy on them and to have some degree of guidance in what the testimonial is going to be about, I ask my clients about a dozen questions and I take notes. And then I edit these notes into a paragraph and send it over to them to review. And if they like it, they sign off on it and say, yep, that's my testimonial. And if they want to make any edits, they can edit it and send it over. So it makes it really easy on them. And I get to guide it into so that I can theme my testimonials. If I know I want a testimonial that talks about a particular aspect of my work, then I can ask questions about that. And I've got a bunch of testimonials on my website, and you can see the results of using this process over the last 8 years because there's dozens of them on there. But what I want to show you is this video. This is a video that came from a webinar with Jeffrey Gitomer, the man who I quoted earlier, and Andy Horner, who's the inventor of the Outstand platform. The two of them gave this great webinar on sales techniques. They give a whole series of webinars, actually. Worked with Stellar Platforms to get the webinars up on a learning management system. And so that was, I worked with them, and it was a really fun project. And I found this 3-minute excerpt from their video webinar so useful that I refer to it time and time again. And so I have this video here at this link, and you can go and check it out. And it's the 7.5 questions to ask your customer when they've agreed to give you a testimonial. And I always review this because it's such a good progression of how to have the conversation, how to open them up, how to butter them up. I mean, Jeffrey Gitomer is just a master at this sort of thing. And so when I know a testimonial conversation is coming up, I watch this video and take a few notes to decide how that conversation is going to go. And it's served me really well to use this process. So now, let's talk about doing all the things. Productivity is a multiplier of how much you can do in your business, how much you can earn, how many projects you can finish. If you can increase your productivity, then you can exponentially improve your business. If you took one thing from this webinar today, just one thing, this is the most effective thing that I can tell you to do. To measure your time. Whether it's in a time tracker or a spreadsheet or a calendar. I just use iCal. I do these blocks of different colors for different clients. And that's what works for me. And then every week I go and I count the number of hours I worked on every project and log it in a spreadsheet. Measuring your time is so effective on your productivity because what gets measured gets managed. If you want to manage your time, you have to measure your time. Measuring your time will give you the intelligence you need to make smart decisions. You'll find out what's working well for you. You'll find out what's taking too much time. You might discover that you've been losing a lot of time to something that you didn't think you were spending a whole lot of time on. By measuring your time diligently, you can get really good intelligence about how to improve your workday. You might have heard this analogy about filling a jar with rocks and sand. That if you start with the sand, it's really tough to get the rocks in later because you got to dig them in there and make room for them. But if you start with the big rocks, sand will fill in all around it. The big rocks are those big, heavy tasks, and the small rocks are the little ones that just fill in throughout the day. If you do the big rocks first, you can make sure the most important things get done. How do you identify the big rocks? You use this matrix. Everything you do is either important or it's not, and it's urgent or it's not. The things that are important and urgent, we tend to do those. They take most of our focus most of the time. Even the things that are not important and urgent, they tend to get done because they show up. Those are the fires that we are always putting out, you know? It's easy to put off things that are not important and not urgent, but these are the big rocks. Things that are important and not urgent, these are often the things that really move the needle, that make a difference in our businesses. Setting aside time for these big rocks, the things that are important and not urgent, this can make a huge effect in your business. There are some people who block off 2 to 3 hours in the morning to work on these things first before they even check email. Find out what works for you. but make sure that you have time in your day to work on the big rocks. It's like Mark Twain says, if it's your job to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat 2 frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. I don't know why he was so into eating frogs, but he's an odd guy. So this is the best productivity book that I've ever read. This revolutionized my productivity. I read Getting Things Done 10 years ago, and I went from being a scatterbrained, messy desk artist kind of guy who wanted to get things done but couldn't figure out how, to being one of the most productive people that I know. And I've become so productive because of these 4 guidelines. We could spend days talking about the Getting Things Done system, but what I want to highlight in this webinar is these 4 items. The inbox is the place where all your stuff goes. Everything and anything. The calls you have to make, the mail you have to open, the projects you have to do, the idea you just had. No matter what it is, there's one central repository, whether it's digital or physical. That's where it goes, is in the inbox. So when you have something that you have to do something with, and you don't know where to put it or what to do with it next, you can put it in the inbox and let it go. And you don't have to, you can move on to other things because you have a process for coming through your inbox and making sure that things get done. However, there's a caveat here, and that's the 2-minute rule. The 2-minute rule is, if it takes less than 2 minutes, do it right then. That's it. Do it right then. If it's going to take less than 2 minutes, do it right then. You might have heard the saying, only handle mail once. And, you know, the idea behind this is that if you're holding a piece of mail, you can open it, you can file it, you can make the phone call, you can do whatever it is you need to do. But if you just stack it, then soon all these little tiny tasks turn into this insurmountable pile. If you use the 2-minute rule and you do it right then, it prevents that from happening. The third thing I want to talk about is the weekly review. And the weekly review is one of my favorite parts of the week. This is when you process your inbox. This is the scheduled time that you set aside to only do the things that are in your inbox. And with everything that's in your inbox, you either do it, you delegate it to somebody else, you defer it to sometime in the future, or you delete it and decide not to do it. Having this system in place, what it really does is it frees your mind so that you can be doing the things in the moment that you're supposed to be doing. And you don't have to be thinking about other things. You could be focused on and present. David Allen says your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. And he makes the point that our brains aren't actually that good at holding things. We're really good at processing and being creative and making connections, but just holding things, we're not that good at. And you could see this in the name of one of the more popular Getting Things Done apps. I've used all these apps over the years. The one that I like the most is Things by Cultured Code. It's Mac only, and it's the one that suits my preference and style the best. But these are 3 of the top ones, the ones that I've used in the past and that I like. And I've always had a soft spot for Remember the Milk, because Remember the Milk is named after a story that David Allen tells in Getting Things Done. And he tells a story about being in a meeting and thinking at 10:30 in the morning, oh, I have to remember to pick up milk on the way home. And so at the end of the meeting, you remind yourself to pick up milk on the way home. And at lunch, you tell yourself, don't forget the milk. And the whole rest of the day, you're thinking about the milk. And so that when you leave the office, if you've been holding on to that idea long enough, then you'll remember the milk. Think about all the mental energy that was wasted in remembering the milk. Whereas you could have taken a second in that meeting and said, oh, I need to remember the milk. I'll set an alarm on my phone for 5:01 that says, remember the milk. And the rest of the day, you don't have to think about it. When you leave the office at 5 o'clock, the alarm goes off and says, remember the milk. And you say, I'm off to the store to get some milk. This is a very simplistic description of what it is that having the GTD system in place does for you is when you have an idea, you have a trusted system that you can put it into so that you know it's going to get processed at the appropriate time. You no longer fear that you're going to lose these ideas and that you have to hold on to them, because your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. Here's some more productive habits that I picked up along the way. If you are the one that others are waiting for, if they're waiting for feedback, if you need to do a revision, if you are the dependency, make it urgent. Pass the buck. Get it off your desk if it's sitting there and waiting on you. The next is to always test a link before you send it to a client. I test every single link that I send out. Just click on it, open in a new tab, just to make sure it works. The first couple years of my business, I noticed that 2 or 3 times a year, I would hear back from a client and they'd say, hey, this link doesn't work. Is this the right link? And they'd get all confused and I'd get all embarrassed. And so I made the commitment to always test every link. In every newsletter, in every email, in every blog post, I always click every link once just to make sure it works. And sure enough, 2 or 3 times a year, the link doesn't work. But because I test it first, I can catch it. And now I don't send out bad links because of this simple habit. This third habit I picked up from Ramit Sethi, who wrote a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. It had a whole bunch of personal finance tips in it, and I don't remember most of it. But the one thing that I took from it that really affected my life was using one account to pay for all automatic payments. At the time, I had automatic payments coming from this account and that account, and it was all over the place. And it was really difficult to chase everything down and make sure that money was in the right place at the right time. And this simple tip cleared up a lot of my financial confusion because it meant that there was one bank account that had to have as much money as all of my automatic payments every month. And that's it. Once I set that up, then it was easy to not think about it anymore. Freed up my mental space so I could do that higher level thinking. And this final tip I learned from a talk I attended at Pioneer Nation in 2015. And it was this tax attorney, financial guy. I don't remember his name, and I don't remember a lot of his talk. But he said, if there's one thing you take from my talk, this is it. And so I took this from it, and I'm really glad that I did because it's been really useful. When clients pay you, have that money go into one bank account and then transfer from that bank account to your personal account or the account for your business expenses or your employees, but don't spend from that account. Have this intermediary account that takes in the money and then distributes it. And it makes all your bookkeeping so much easier. So those are the 4 most productive habits that I've incorporated throughout my career. One of the things that gives me a lot of ease in my life is FreshBooks. FreshBooks makes all of my billing and invoicing super easy. It's also got a great time tracking tool if you want to use it for time tracking. But having the billing taken care of just for a few bucks a month, I've always found to be a real help in my business because I don't have to chase people down for invoices. I don't have to figure out how this money is going to get over here. I let FreshBooks take care of it. I set up a simple invoice, send it over, link to my rates and terms page, and it's done. Okay, so now let's talk about your purpose. Your why. Why you do what you do. Simon Sinek gave one of the most popular TED Talks of all time. And he has a book by the same title, Start With Why. And he makes the point that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. If you can be clear about your why, it's going to make people feel a lot better about doing business with you, especially if you're aligned. So you know what the most popular page is on just about everybody's website, right? If you've got Google Analytics, you've probably seen it in your own website that your most popular page is your About page. This is true for most service providers that I know, is that their About page is the most popular page on the website. And the reason why is because people want to know your why. If they're looking at you and considering doing business with you or just checking you out, the About page is where they find out about you. Not the particulars of your service, they find out about you. And if you can clearly articulate your why, and you can distribute that why through the stages of your customer journey, then it's going to make it a lot more likely that the right people are going to want to do business with you. So if you're talking to the right people, these are people who could say yes to you. And if you make it easy for them to say yes, and you make it easy for them to pay you, then they're going to feel a lot better about doing it. When you have your intake process set up, I recommend that you give a friend a few $100s and say, hey, pay me this few $100. I want to take you through my intake process and get your feedback on what it's like step by step. I did this with a friend when I was just starting, gave him $500, and I said, hey, pay me $500 for something. And we made up a project, and he went through my onboarding process, and he said, you know where I didn't see you at all was in your message to say, let's do this. And this illuminated to me that this is a really key part of the process. When you send that final email that says, hey, I'm ready to do this. Are you ready to do this? This is a place where if you provide your why as the context to why you're making this offer, then you're entering into a business relationship that's aligned with purpose. And that's something that people want to do a lot more than just get something done. They want to be aligned with a purpose. There's this old sales adage that after you ask a closing question, the next person to talk loses. And so when you send that message, when you ask that question, when you make the final offer, are we going to do this? Wait. Give your future client time and space, even if there's silence, and let them decide and respond. So this last point has to do with my favorite part of this, the process. I am going to geek out so hard on process, and I'm going to start by talking about contracts. Contracts are they're handled by everybody a little differently because there's a lot of different advice out there. And I am not a lawyer. I don't have any legal training. And so I'm not going to give you any legal advice. I'm just going to tell you what's worked for me. I come from America, which is one of the most litigious societies in the world. And I have never used a client contract. Part of it is because I don't want to introduce the friction of having my new client print something and sign it and scan it. And that's usually a cumbersome process in the digital age. But more than that, I find it unnecessary because email is admissible in court. Email is time-stamped. So it says exactly what was said and when it was said, and there's a digital record of it for everybody to see. I'm really clear and detailed in my email communication. And if I ever need to refer to anything in court that was agreed upon, I write it all out in a proposal. And when my client emails back and says, yes, let's do it, that's admissible in court. What do I need a signed contract for? There's been a time or two in my career where I've had some clients leave upset. Doesn't happen often, but it's happened a couple times. And each time when they said, we're going to get lawyers and I'm taking you to court, I laid out my case in email. And I said, as you'll remember from these weekly reports, and I gave them links, and you said in these emails, and I forwarded the emails, and I have all the documentation there. So I've never needed a contract. What you do in your business, that's really going to be between you and your legal advisor. So please don't take this as legal advice. I'm just telling you what's worked for me is that I don't ever use contracts in my business. So now let's talk about rates. And there's a few different ways that you can charge for your services. And there's advantages and disadvantages to each one. And so I'm going to go through the good points and the bad points. What I like about hourly rates is that if you work, you get paid. You're not working off the clock. There's not unexpected things that come up that you have to work on that you don't get paid for. Getting paid hourly means you get paid for all the time you work. The disadvantage is it can scare off clients. And I find that it scares them off more in talking with you, ironically, because they think, do I really need to pay for this 20-minute conversation? And they start to penny pinch and nitpick. And so that's the bad part about hourly rates. Project rates are great because everybody knows how much everybody's paying all up front. You define it, it's you set the invoice milestones and when the payments are due, and that way there's no question about how much money is changing hands. However, the new variable is how much work is being done. The disadvantage to project rates is that you can uncover unexpected difficulties that need to be tended to, that are your responsibility to fix, and you've got to do it all functionally off the clock. You're not making any more money on a project rate if you have to do more work. It's called scope creep in the business. When the scope of the project creeps up and up and up, you could say, all right, for this project, we're going to do 50% down and then 50% on completion of the project. And you get that first invoice and you do the work and you go through the whole project and then you want to deliver it and say, we're done. But the client says, no, we're not done. I need this and this. Wait, I still need this. Wait, have we done this? And it can drag out. And so because of that, I'm not a big fan of project rates anymore. I tend to do retainer rates. Retainer rates are great because you know how much revenue that you're getting every period, whether it's every week or every month. I like monthly retainers, and that's how I typically work with my clients nowadays. The disadvantage to retainers is that you have to continually reprove why it is that they're paying you. You're reselling your services again and again. Now, with weekly reports, it makes this not so much of an issue because the weekly reports are constantly reproving, they're validating the decision to do business with you. And so that's why I think the weekly reports are a really great solution to the disadvantage here for retainer rates. All right, now we're getting to the part that I'm really excited about, the 4 formulas for client analysis. These helped me figure out what kind of business I needed to do and who I needed to do it with. And I'll go through each one of these formulas with you. And the first is your expense ratio. It's all of your expenses divided by all of your revenue. When you track this over time, you could see historically how much you spend in expenses on a client. And the expense ratio lets you know how much you can expect to pocket. So let's say you have a historical expense ratio of 15%. And somebody says, hey, I want to hire you for this $1,000 piece of work. Then you can do the math in your head and know that you're going to pocket about $850. And so the expense ratio is really helpful for revenue planning. The second formula is the time to completion. You record all of your completion or all of your starting dates with all of your clients and all of your completion dates when the projects are done. You pop in this simple formula and then you get a number of days. You do an average for all of your clients, and then you can see in the data how long it takes you to finish a project. When I was in year 2 or 3 of my business, I thought it took 2 months to put together a WordPress site, get it out the door. And if things go right, then it'll take about that long with the sorts of projects that I do. But I measured it and I found that it usually took 3 months. And that was surprising to me. I didn't expect it to be 3 months, but historically that's what it was ending up like because I was waiting for client feedback. I was, some things took longer and it just ended up being 3 months. And so that helped me manage my clients' expectations a lot clearer by telling them, if we're going to start on this day, let's add 3 months to it, and this is when we can expect the launch. The closing ratio is how likely you are to close a proposal. And there's 2 ways you can measure this. And the first is by number. The second is by revenue. You take the number of proposals that you close, you divide it by the number that you send out, and you get a percentage. And that percentage is how likely you are to close the deal. I like doing it with revenue, where you add in the value of all your proposals, and then you divide that by the value of the proposals that you actually closed, because that's automatically weighted. If you put out 3 proposals, one of them's for $1,000, one of them's for $2,000, and another one's for $10,000, and you only close the $10,000 one, you either have a closing ratio of 30% or 80%. And it matters which one you use, because it matters if you're closing the big deals more than if you're closing the small deals. This final formula is what helped me determine who my target market needed to be. And I thought that I was best served to work with WordPress bloggers, people who knew WordPress and were already using the tool. But it turned out, when I measured my hourly rate per client, that the types of people who I was making the most money from didn't know WordPress that well. They couldn't publish a blog post on their own. I was doing project rates at the time, and I was spending less time to do work that they were very happy with. But WordPress users, people who knew how to install plugins and do things in the CMS, they were a lot more picky, and they wanted a lot more specific project items that took more time. But using value-based pricing, which is something you can do with project work, I was able to deliver a set package of items, a website, a logo design, and branding package and content. And when I delivered it to people who didn't know WordPress that well, they were satisfied earlier and didn't give me so many revisions. And I could figure this out because I took my net cost to the client, how much they paid, subtracted my expenses, and I divided it by the number of hours that I worked for that client. And I tracked all of this data in a client analysis spreadsheet. I've got a template here for you that you can go to this link below and get this Google Doc. You make a copy of the Google Doc, and then you just pop in your client data. And if you have historical data that you can put in, the formulas are already in here, and you'll be able to calculate some of these things right away. And if you haven't been tracking all this data yet, you can start now. You could start with your clients right now in tracking these sorts of metrics in order to make intelligent decisions about your business. And I hope that this seminar is going to help you do that, and that you're going to make intelligent decisions about your freelance business, and that you succeed. So if this has been useful to you, then leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought. Send out an email, say hello, shoot out a tweet. It's been great giving you this presentation, and I wish you the best of luck out there.